Hello everybody. This is going to be a little bit of a different video than I usually make. And if I look tired, that's because I am. The past few days hearing about the different murders and shootings and all of that has really got me down, just like a lot of my friends are down. Everybody on social media is down. It's been a very sad few days, and this continues to happen in our society. And so what I want to do is dig in a little deeper, try to make some of this make sense, see what we can do, and how it all ties into your self-improvement in the end. So I've been watching the discourse all around social media and talking with friends, and I found lots of questions, some things to sort of debate back and forth maybe about, but in the end I think there are some good things that we can do, and I'll put that forth towards the end. Stay tuned here, see what you think, interested in your take on all of this. So first off, what do the various school shootings, the killing of the Ukrainian woman on one of our subway trains and the shooting of Charlie Kirk have in common? Well, there are some common threads. First of all, they are acts of violence in public spaces. All three incidents involve violence carried out in places where ordinary people should feel safe, like schools, public transit, a public speaking event. That public setting is part of what makes these events so shocking. Secondly, it's targeting of vulnerable or symbolic victims. School shootings often target children or young adults, the most vulnerable members of society. The subway killing involved an immigrant woman in an everyday situation, just riding the train after work. And the shooting of Charlie Kirk, a political figure, is an attack on someone symbolic representing broader social or political divisions. So in each case, the victim represents more than just an individual. They symbolize vulnerability, identity, or ideology. Thirdly, these motivations are rooted in social breakdown. Although the motivations differ, personal grievances, mental illness, xenophobia, political extremism, they reflect deeper problems like alienation, hatred, or the willingness to resort to violence to express grievances. And four, there's media amplification. Each of these events generates wide media coverage. They become part of national or global conversations about safety, extremism, guns, or political polarization. In that sense, they don't just affect direct victims, they ripple through society. So in short, they're all acts of public violence rooted in social tensions, targeting people seen as vulnerable or symbolic, and amplified by the media into touch points of broader societal debates. So what are the causes they share and the social consequences? Let's get the whole picture. The shared causes are, first of all, polarization and extremism. School shootings sometimes emerge from alienation, bullying, or resentment that festers in extreme online or social environments. Hate crimes like the subway killing of the Ukrainian woman are often fueled by xenophobia or prejudice, or in this case it could even be mental illness. Political shootings like Charlie Kirk's are directly tied to ideological polarization. The common thread is when divisions harden into us versus them thinking, violence becomes a way some individuals express that. Secondly, there's access to weapons. In the U.S. especially, guns are widely available. Easy access makes an angry impulse or extremist idea far more deadly. Without that access, some of these violent impulses might remain threats, but not mass tragedies. 3, there's unaddressed mental health and social breakdown. Isolation, untreated mental illness, substance abuse, or personal despair often sit at the root of violent outbursts. Schools, public transit, and political events all bring together strangers in tense or stressful situations where these issues can explode. And then there's copycat and media influence. High-profile acts of violence get amplified, sometimes inspiring others to imitate or escalate. For individuals seeking attention or notoriety, the media spotlight itself becomes part of the motivation. And what are the shared consequences? Well, number 1, public fear and anxiety. Parents worry about their children in schools. Commuters wonder if transit is safe. Political audiences fear attending events. So everyday spaces start to feel unsafe. Second, there's erosion of trust. People lose trust in their communities, neighbors, and even institutions meant to keep them safe. In multicultural or politically divided societies, suspicion between groups deepens. And 3, there are calls for policy change. So for school shootings, there are debates over gun control, school security, and mental health funding. There are hate crimes, which fuel debates about immigration policy, policing, and tolerance. Political violence, where there will be debates about free speech, security at events, and political rhetoric. So each incident sparks urgent and often polarized demands for laws or systemic change. And there's media and cultural impact. These events dominate headlines, social media, and political discourse. They become reference points for future debates on safety, rights, and freedoms. They can also feed cycles of polarization if covered in partisan ways. So in summary, they share causes rooted in polarization, weapons access, mental health neglect, and the copycat effect. They share consequences of heightened fear, mistrust, policy battles, and cultural scars. So how do these fit into the bigger historical pattern? So if we zoom out historically, starting with the assassination of President Lincoln, it's a good starting point for understanding how public violence in America has shifted forms but remained tied to social and political tensions. So, in the 19th century, Lincoln and political violence. 1865 was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, killed Lincoln in a theater, framing it as revenge for the South's defeat. The cause was deep national polarization, Civil War, slavery, Reconstruction. The consequence is fear, grief, and an unstable Reconstruction era. Pattern set was political violence as a way to strike at a nation by targeting symbolic figures. In the early 20th century, there are anarchists and political figures. Several high-profile assassinations and attempts happened. 1901, President William McKinley was killed by an anarchist. Bombings and attacks tied to labor unrest and radical ideologies. Public space violence starts to shift from Civil War grievances to ideological movements. America sees violence as a tool for radicals to make political statements. Then there's the mid-20th century, the Civil Rights era, and political upheaval. The 1960s assassinations, John F. Kennedy in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, and also Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. The cause was turbulence of civil rights, Cold War paranoia, and generational political clashes. Consequence was shattered public trust, rising cynicism about safety of leaders. So assassinations became a backdrop to America's struggle with race, war, and ideology. In the late 20th century, mass shootings emerge. From the 1980s to the 1990s, school shootings and workplace shootings appear more frequently. Example is the Stockton schoolyard shooting in 1989. Motivations shift from ideological targeting to personal grievances like bullying, job loss, or alienation. Gun availability and media amplification play larger roles. The mass shooter archetype is born alongside lingering assassinations and attacks, for example, the Reagan attempt in 1981. In the 21st century, domestic terror, school shootings, and polarization. So Columbine in 1999 marks a turning point, cultural blueprint for later school shooters. Post-2001, fear of terrorism overlaps with domestic extremism. The 2010s to 2020s, you had Sandy Hook, 2012, Parkland, 2018, Uvalde, 2022. School shootings became painfully routine. You had hate crimes, Charleston Church, Pittsburgh Synagogue, Buffalo Supermarket, and political attacks, Gabby Giffords, 2011, Steve Scalise, 2017, and now Charlie Kirk. The causes are polarization, left versus right, race, immigration, radicalization online, mental health crises, continued gun availability, and the consequences are public fear of schools, places of worship, transit, rallies, polarized policy debates, gun rights versus gun control, free speech versus safety, and copycat cycles through social media. So, tying these in, Lincoln to now, Lincoln's assassination, 1865, and Charlie Kirk's shooting, 2020s, are on the same spectrum, violence against symbolic political figures to make a statement. And McKinley, 1901, and school shootings, 1990s to 2020s, connect through alienated individuals lashing out at society. And you have civil rights assassinations in the 1960s, echo in today's hate crimes targeting minorities and immigrants. The constant thread is violence in public spaces fueled by social division, amplified by the media, and leaving lasting scars on the national psyche. So when you put it all together, from Lincoln's assassination through today, public violence in America has evolved from targeted political killings to mass shootings and hate crimes. But the root causes, division, ideology, alienation, and access to weapons, remain strikingly consistent. Now, when talking about gun control, I see a statement online such as, "There is nothing we can do about these violent crimes because even if we have gun control, the criminals will still find a way to get guns." Well, there's true and false in this. Where there is truth, criminals do find ways around laws. History shows that black markets thrive when restrictions rise. Think of alcohol prohibition, the war on drugs. Gun laws alone can't erase violence. People with strong intent may still get weapons illegally or may turn to other methods like bombs, knives, vehicles. And America already has 400 plus million guns in circulation. Even if strict laws passed tomorrow, that stockpile would remain, a huge challenge for law enforcement. And where the statement misses part of the picture, not all violent actors are career criminals. Many school shooters, workplace shooters, or people committing hate crimes are first-time offenders who obtain guns legally. Gun control can reduce access for these individuals. Other countries are proof. Nations like Australia, after the Port Arthur massacre in 1996, or the UK after Dublin in 1996, tightened gun laws and saw sharp drops in mass shootings. It didn't eliminate all violence, but it reduced the scale and frequency. Gun control isn't just bans. It can mean background checks, waiting periods, safe storage laws, or red flag laws, removing guns temporarily from people in crisis. These reduce impulsive acts of violence and suicides, which make up most U.S. gun deaths. So, for a balanced view, it's true that laws won't stop all criminals. Some will always find guns, but it doesn't follow that there's nothing we can do. Public policy combined with mental health support, community programs, and better security can reduce risk, even if it can't erase it. It's similar to car accidents. We still have them despite speed limits, seatbelts, and DUI laws, but those measures save thousands of lives every year. Some laws that have helped was the federal assault weapons ban, 1994 to 2004. Studies show mixed results, but there was a noticeable decline in mass shooting deaths during the decade of the ban compared to before or after. But after it expired in 2004, mass shootings with higher casualty counts increased again. So restricting high-capacity weapons didn't end shootings, but it reduced how deadly they were. And then the drunk driving laws and seatbelts, 1970s to the 1990s, the impact was that traffic deaths dropped by thousands annually. Just like car safety laws didn't end car accidents, gun safety laws won't end shootings, but they can reduce fatalities. And then there was the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993. It stopped more than 3 million prohibited buyers, the felons, domestic abusers, fugitives, from purchasing guns legally since 1994. While some still got guns illegally, many couldn't, and that means crimes that might have happened didn't. And number 4, safe storage and child access prevention laws in various states. Research shows states with these laws have significantly fewer accidental child shootings and youth suicides. So it's not about banning guns, but about making ownership safer. And domestic violence gun restrictions from 1990s to the present. So that one is those with restraining orders and domestic violence convictions keeps them from buying or owning firearms. Studies found drops in intimate partner homicides in states that enforce these laws strongly. So targeted restrictions help protect vulnerable victims. So the takeaway is that gun control doesn't have to mean take everyone's guns away, but targeted measures like background checks, bans on certain weapons, storage laws, domestic violence restrictions, reduce violence measurably. They don't stop every determined criminal, but they reduce the pool of guns available to impulsive or high-risk actors, which cuts down deaths. Now, there's a lot of discussion online about freedom of speech. And one particular sentiment I keep hearing is that we shouldn't fear being shot, murdered somehow due to something we say. But that keeps happening. If someone says something another person disagrees with, there is a fear of being murdered. Freedom of speech means people can express ideas, even unpopular or controversial ones, without government punishment. But freedom of speech doesn't guarantee freedom from consequences in society. And tragically, in the U.S., that sometimes includes violent retaliation. When someone like Charlie Kirk or Gabby Giffords or Martin Luther King Jr. is attacked because of their speech, it undermines the very principle of open dialogue. This keeps happening for a few reasons. One of them is polarization and dehumanization. Opponents aren't just wrong anymore. They're seen as dangerous, evil, or enemies. That dehumanization makes violence feel justified to unstable or extremist minds. Then there's amplification through media, which I've talked about. Social media spreads outrage instantly. People already primed for anger get triggered by speeches, posts, or clips and act out violently. And then there's access to weapons. In countries with stricter gun controls, violent responses to speech are rarer or less lethal. Here, angry words plus easy weapons equals a deadly mix. So the historical pattern, Lincoln was assassinated partly for his ideas ending slavery. JFK, MLK, Malcolm X, and RFK were assassinated for what they represented or said. And now public figures, left, right, or center, face constant security threats. So throughout U.S. history, those who speak boldly or represent social change often face violent opposition. So the dilemma, if people fear speaking out, free speech is chilled, not because of the government, but because of threat of violence. That undermines democracy itself, because debate becomes too dangerous. What sorts of things can be done, though? Well, better protection for one. Public events may need tighter security for speakers, even if that feels sad in a free society. I'm amazed at the amount of roofs that these shooters go on that are not being watched, or they say they're not being watched. And de-escalation culture, teaching people to disagree without dehumanizing. Right now, rhetoric often frames opponents as traitors, or vermin, or scum. That language encourages violence. There should be legal accountability, ensuring those who make threats or incite violence face consequences, so the line between speech and violence is maintained. So a society can't truly have freedom of speech if people are afraid of being murdered for their words. The U.S. has struggled with this since Lincoln, and the balance between openness and safety is still unresolved. So what can ordinary citizens do to help protect free speech from being stifled by fear of violence? First of all, reject dehumanizing language. Even if we strongly disagree with someone, avoid framing them as evil, vermin, an enemy, scum. History shows that once people are seen as less than human, violence against them becomes easier to justify. And secondly, practice civil disagreement. Model respectful debate. I disagree with your idea because ... instead of, you're a monster, you're an idiot, and some swear words. It sounds small, but it sets a tone in communities and online spaces that disagreement doesn't equal hatred. And 3, take threats seriously. If you hear or see someone glorifying violence against speakers or groups, report it. Many violent actors give warning signs online or in person before acting. 4, support mental health resources. Many attackers are isolated, unstable individuals who slip through the cracks. Supporting community mental health programs helps prevent small crises from exploding into violence. 5, build free speech norms in local spaces. So in schools, workplaces, churches, and community groups, encourage open dialogue instead of silencing. The more people are used to safe disagreement at a local level, the less alien the idea of civil debate feels at a national level. And 6, encourage nonviolent activism. Remind people that change in a democracy is made through organizing, voting, and persuasion, not violence. Uplifting examples like MLK's nonviolence, Gandhi, or peaceful protest traditions keep this principle alive. The bottom line is we can't stop every violent individual, but we can build a culture where violence is seen as unacceptable and where disagreement doesn't automatically mean danger. That cultural pressure matters alongside laws and security. Now, if the idea of reporting someone you think is going to be violent, or if they're saying something you don't believe in, you think of it as a violence, something that they're saying, and you don't want to report them, you feel weird about it, like it's going to turn into communism or McCarthyism, These are the things what we don't want. We don't want a culture where everyone tattles on everyone for their beliefs. We don't want surveillance of unpopular opinions. And we don't want government or social pressure to punish people simply for thinking differently. That's exactly what authoritarian systems in the McCarthy era look like. But there's a difference. There's a big line between I don't like Charlie Kirk's ideas, protected free speech, and I'm going to shoot Charlie Kirk at this next event. That's a criminal threat. Reporting is not about opinions. It's about credible threats of violence. So in practice, if someone posts a manifesto about killing classmates or a detailed plan to attack a synagogue, ignoring it risks lives. The middle ground is that instead of report everything, think to yourself, is this a different viewpoint? I disagree, debate, let it stand. Or ask yourself, is this a threat to harm people? That crosses the line into crime. That's not free speech. That way we preserve freedom of expression while still protecting against violence. So it's right to dislike the sound of reporting people left and right. The key is drawing a bright line. Report threats of violence, not unpopular speech. Now, a lot of people are noticing that with the left and the right, one side may be doing something that is a violent statement or a violent meme or something, and not getting in trouble for it, or just getting a slap on the hand, whereas the other side, if they do the same things, are getting, more trouble, losing jobs, being sued and things like that. So it does feel unfair. There's selective outrage. Like one side, if violence is imagined against one side, it's called art or free expression. And if it's imagined against the other, it's called incitement. So it's a double standard. It erodes trust. And there's uneven enforcement. Local authorities, federal agencies, and media don't always respond consistently. And who's in power can affect whether threats are taken seriously. So there's a cultural bias. The media and entertainment lean left in the U.S. That means violent rhetoric against the right sometimes gets dismissed as symbolic, while the reverse is magnified. What should apply is that threats of violence, no matter who they target, should not be tolerated. You can say you hate someone's politics, but you can't threaten to physically harm them. So when that principle is enforced consistently, people regain trust that free speech is truly free. But in reality, a lot of people are thinking, they've said that we're too far gone to fix things. It's nice in reality, but people are too stubborn to change or be nice. So the dark reality is that polarization is real. We're living in one of the most divided eras since the Civil War in the 1960s. People dig in, not soften. Once people pick a side, it's rare for them to openly admit fault or to listen to the other. And acts of violence feed despair. Every shooting or threat feels like more proof that kindness is gone. So the counterweight is that, most people aren't violent. Even though it feels like society is crumbling, violent crime is still committed by a small minority. Local life is often better than national headlines. Neighbors still help each other. Communities still come together in crises. The national picture looks worse than the day-to-day reality many live in. And change doesn't require everyone. Social shifts often start with small groups, not mass agreement. That's almost impossible to get, the mass agreement. And civil rights, women's rights, disability rights, they all began with a determined minority. So while we won't get magical sweeping changes where everyone suddenly is nice, change does happen. It will be slow, uneven, and imperfect, but still possible in pockets. So the big picture may still be messy, stubborn, and discouraging, but at the level of families, neighborhoods, or small communities, people can still choose civility, and that's often where real change starts. Let me give you a little bit of proof of that. In the following events, people thought the country was too far gone and it was just going to die away. But we got pulled out, starting at the grassroots levels. So, after the Civil War, with 600,000 plus dead, cities burned and the country split by hatred, many thought the U.S. would never survive. Reconstruction was messy, bitter, and violent, but the Union held together, slavery was abolished, and institutions adapted. The U.S. stumbled forward rather than collapsing entirely. Then there was the Great Depression in the 1930s. People lined up for bread, banks were failing, unemployment was near 25%. Some thought democracy itself would fail. Fascism and communism were rising worldwide. The New Deal, imperfect as it was, rebuilt trust and gave people a sense that government could help. America didn't collapse into dictatorship as some feared. Then with the Civil Rights Movement, segregation was so deeply entrenched, many thought it was unshakable. Violence against activists were rampant. Church bombings, murders, assassinations. Yet through persistent grassroots action and moral clarity, legal segregation ended, the civil rights laws were passed. The culture shifted even though racism didn't disappear. And then came the Cold War and nuclear fear. During the Cuban Missile Crisis in '62, many truly thought it was the end of the world. Families were building bomb shelters. But restraint, back-channel talks, and later arms agreements pulled the world back from the brink of nuclear war. Then in the 1990s, you had South Africa and apartheid. Decades of brutal racial segregation, violent uprisings, and international isolation. Most believed it could only end in a bloodbath. Instead, Nelson Mandela and others steered it into a negotiated transition. Far from perfect, but civil war was avoided. So the pattern in each case is that people first said things are too far gone, and the problems didn't vanish overnight, but small groups, leaders, or communities made different choices and nudged history away from total collapse. So while people can be stubborn, history shows that even when society feels broken beyond repair, things can bend. Not because everyone changes, but because enough people choose to act differently. So, since I talked about grassroots, let's zoom in on the role of ordinary people in these too far gone moments. So, during the Civil War and Reconstruction, it wasn't just generals and presidents. Everyday citizens kept the country alive. Families who lost everything still planted crops, opened schools, and wrote letters pushing for a new America. Black communities built churches and mutual aid groups, often the first safe places for education and organizing. So regular people laid the groundwork for rebuilding, even as politics stayed bitter. And in the Great Depression, mutual aid was everywhere. Churches ran soup kitchens, neighbors shared food and firewood, women organized clothing drives. Grassroots labor unions pressed for safer work conditions, which directly shaped New Deal reforms. The survival of many families came from community action, not just government relief. And in the Civil Rights Movement, yes, Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks were iconic, but thousands of unknown citizens did the day-to-day work. Parents enrolling kids in dangerous, newly integrated schools, students risking beatings and sit-ins, local churches organizing carpools during bus boycotts. The movement only worked because ordinary people refused to go along quietly anymore. During the Cold War, people worldwide organized peace marches, signed petitions, and pressured leaders to pursue arms control. mothers in the U.S. formed Women's Strike for Peace to demand nuclear testing bans, and they got partial success in the 1963 Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. So small voices added up to international pressure. And in South Africa with apartheid, international boycotts of South African products started with ordinary students, churches, and community groups. Local South Africans organized strikes and protests even under brutal repression. The apartheid system didn't crumble only because of Mandela. It cracked under relentless pressure from ordinary citizens at home and abroad. So when the big picture looks hopeless, small communities of ordinary people feed neighbors, build schools, march and protest, support each other's survival, and refuse to normalize injustice. That's what nudges history away from collapse. Not because everyone changes, but because enough people stand firm. So now what can we do for our self-improvement? How does this tie in somehow? There are things you can do for yourself that will help you in these times where you feel shaky, sad, unsure about the world, unsafe. First of all, strengthen your inner resilience. Limit doom scrolling. So stay informed about the news, but set boundaries. You don't want constant exposure to violent headlines. And do some mindset work. As I've always said, journaling, meditation, or prayer can help you process your fear or anger rather than letting them harden into cynicism. And have a perspective shift. Remind yourself that while violence is real and serious, most daily human interactions are still safe, kind, and cooperative. Secondly, practice civil courage in daily life. What you want to do is model respectful disagreement. Show people around you that it's possible to have strong views without resorting to hostility. Use empathy wisely, even if some dismiss the word. The practice of trying to understand another's perspective helps break cycles of dehumanization. And respond, don't react. When confronted with the vision, take a breath before speaking or typing, because this small pause can stop conflict from escalating. Focus on what you can control, like your health. Exercise, eat well, rest. A strong body supports a calmer mind. And work in your immediate community. Volunteer, help a neighbor, or support a local cause. While you can't fix national polarization, you can improve your corner of the world. And use your voice. Share ideas through writing, videos, or conversations, but frame them with respect, not as attacks. And transform your fear into purpose. Channel your concern into action. If shootings or violence disturb you, consider supporting causes around mental health, community safety, or youth programs. Find meaning in your contribution. Helping others gives you agency in a world that feels chaotic. And 4, balance. 3 in this one, balance activism with personal growth. Pouring from an empty cup doesn't help. Your self-improvement fuels your ability to contribute. And create a stability routine. Do a daily check-in, like with gratitude journaling or affirmations that can keep your perspective grounded. Make sure you do a weekly digital detox. Even a few hours away from divisive media resets your nervous system. And use a creative outlet like music, art, or writing. It helps process anxiety constructively. So if you're working on your self-improvement, it can't stop the world's violence, but you can build resilience, model respectful living, and create pockets of sanity and kindness. That ripple effect matters more than it seems. So I hope this presentation has helped. And if you like to comment, please do so. Thank you for listening. And let's keep it respectful and civil and just love each other.